What do I want to talk about today? I want to talk about a failure of leadership and how our organization, by God's grace, exists to try to compensate for leaders who ought to be providing guidance that is not being provided. And Jesus in the book of Matthew, I believe the 9th chapter of the book of Matthew, laments the fact that so many people for whom he felt compassion were leaderless. They were directionless. They were drifting because they had no shepherds to guide them. And we're very much in that situation today. We're facing a catastrophic failure of political leadership. Our political leaders on the left are smart and driven and passionate, and on the right, they're divided and they are confused and they are irresolute, and it really is a bit of a train wreck. I read recently that during the COVID pandemic, 40%, I think this was a Pew study. I have fairly high confidence in the Pew Foundation. Pew reported that some 40% of pastors, clergy in active ministry were considering leaving the ministry during COVID. So, I mean, what? 40% were considering quitting? Are you kidding me? That's not leadership. Maybe they're managers, maybe they're teachers, maybe whatever they are, but they're not leaders. A leader bears down when the going gets tough. George Barna, who's sort of he's not like a golfing buddy, but I do talk to him from time to time, is a well-known public opinion researcher, and he does he does a lot of consulting on issues related to the church. And he did a survey some years ago in which he asked Protestant pastors to list their spiritual gifts, and only 7% said the word leadership. They identified themselves as administrators or music teachers or worship leaders or preachers or who knows what, but only 7% said leadership. We don't have leaders in large measure because our Bible colleges are not producing people who went to Bible college to learn to be leaders. They might have gone to learn to be worship leaders or something, but not leaders in the broader sense of that term. And that means the people who go to seminary don't go there because they have leadership skills or aspirations. And that means our churches get pastored by clergy who were not recruited and trained, etc., to be leaders. So we have very weak leadership in the church, and our political leadership is weak. I don't say unkindly, the leadership of the pro-life movement is weak. Very few people know, it's a sort of a startling statistic, but on the political left, there are 800 women's studies programs, feminist studies programs, largely at public universities, largely paid for by you and by me, and they recruit young women and they train them to be pro-abortion activists and pro-transgender activists and all these awful things, hysterical climate extremists and all the rest of this stuff. They recruit them and train them to be that. And they're well educated, and they mentor them, and they get them internships, they give them job placement assistance, and then they unleash them every 12 months. A new wave of them, thousands of them, get unleashed on society. And they find their way onto congressional staffs, and they find their way into classrooms, and they're having an extremely corrosive effect on young people, teaching young people that there's nothing about America that is exceptional or worth fighting for or worth saving, that America is evil and corrupt from its founding, and there's nothing about a human embryo that's exceptional, nothing about the embryo that would merit rights of personhood or what have you. So What do we have on our side? Training young people to provide leadership to the pro-life movement? Basically, nothing. We have essentially nothing. And I have had many painful conversations with the people who run our Bible colleges in America, the people who run our seminaries in America, and they actually respond with hostility when you suggest to them that if our schools, conservative schools, Hillsdale College, for instance, is not willing to begin training young people to be conservative activists, nothing is going to change. The one school, it's a tiny school that maybe makes a slight difference, is Patrick Henry College, and Patrick Henry College would not allow us onto their campus to help train their students in pro-life activism. So you can't beat something with nothing, and Larry Arnn, the president of Hillsdale College, I've never met. I read his materials fairly regularly. He's a Churchill scholar. I'm a Churchill fan. I have a lot of respect for his intellect, his scholarship. He is so hostile to activism that he would not allow our prenatal development display, not even our pro-life display, just our prenatal development picture display. He would not allow it on the campus at Hillsdale last year. And he has written that as long as he's the president of Hillsdale, there will never be activism permitted on his campus. So you compare that with the 800 university presidents on the political left who have all of this pro-abortion, pro-trans, whatever, leadership training going on, and you can see why we are losing. So CBR struggles to identify students who care about these kinds of issues but are not, they have no leadership to speak of, and we try to fill that void to the extent that we can. So that's a distinctive, it's part of our mission, trying to raise up the next generation of pro-life leaders, but it's extremely difficult when we not only don't get help from conservative organizations, we don't get help from the church, we don't get help from other pro-life groups, which are notoriously unwilling to work with one another. Thank you for all you mean to us, and the good news is, in the midst of all this bad news, the good news is this is a winnable fight. We know how to win it. Two-thirds of the voting public in this country think the human embryo is a blob, and they think the early fetus is a clump of cells. We now have the technology, endoscopic imagery principally, to rebut that mythology and to prove the baby really is a baby from the very beginning of pregnancy. And thank you for helping us expose that truth to the American people.